I think that definitely makes sense in terms of the imagery, the way that your mind is drawn to kind of try to view this image. You're right that it says 10 horns over and over again, unless they were talking about some completely separated horn that wasn't connected to the beast, which would really make no sense, that it would be this self-sufficient little horn over here. But that's not what the imagery is actually saying, right? It's talking about a beast with 10 horns. So I think your interpretation there made a lot of sense to me when I was reading through it, that the little one was a part of the 10, because like you said, it says it over and over that there's 10 horns, and then you go into Revelation and it also is talking about 10 horns.
Yeah, it says, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. Later on, we're going to find out that the little horns comes after them. And when you read it, you can take it as it came after the 10, or you could take it as it comes after the 3. Or you could take it as he saw afterward the little horn come up. We haven't gotten to that yet. In between, there's a vision of the Ancient of Days, which is also very interesting, but we're not going to focus on that here. And then he comes back to the 10 horns again. I watched them because of the sound of the pompous words which the horn was speaking. I watched till the beast was slain and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. And for the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season at a time. Okay, now I'm just going to kind of spill the beans up front. The way I take this is that the 10 horns are the line of emperors, not a simultaneous group, but a successive group. All right, so what you had in the first century BC and first century AD were 10 Roman emperors. There was Julius Caesar, and then Augustus, then Tiberius, Gaius Caligula, Claudius, and then the 6th one is Nero. And then after, there was a war. This was called the Year of the Four Emperors, which took place between 68 to 69 AD. And you had in order Galba, Otho, Vitellius, and then Vespasian, who's the 10th. That's how I take it. All right, now John Calvin takes the 10 horns to be Rome. He just doesn't take it to mean 10 separate individuals. He takes it as a generally symbolic number, Rome. And the little horn specifically is the line of the emperors, especially the emperors that persecuted the church. And then what's interesting is that Calvin does mention Nero specifically, and he spends some time on that in his commentary. Okay, one of the things I want to say about John Calvin is that when people hear the name Calvin, one of the first things they think about is the 5 points of Calvinism. And we know that John Calvin didn't actually write those. He did write a book called Institutes of the Christian Religion. And most people who read Calvin would want to read that. But what I would actually really recommend that people do is pick up one of Calvin's commentaries on a book in the Bible that you're interested in. Because Calvin is really one of the greatest expositors of Scripture that ever lived. I mean, he wrote on most of the books in the Bible in his lifetime. And one of them was the book of Daniel. So in his Institutes, he does talk about the Antichrist as being the Roman pontiff of the Pope. Okay? And he says, to some we seem slanderous and petulant when we call the Roman pontiff Antichrist. And he goes on and he defends that. But then in another passage, right, here is not the reference to the Antichrist, but to Daniel 7, which is a little horn. So he may not have had his commentary on Daniel worked out when he wrote his Institutes, but he wrote the commentary on Daniel later on in his lifetime, toward the end of his lifetime. And here he says that, where it says, I was attentive, therefore, he says, to the horns, and behold, one small one arose among them. So Calvin here is commentating on Daniel 7. Interpreters begin to vary. Some twist this to mean the Pope, and others the Turk, but neither opinion seems probable. They are both wrong, since they think the whole course of Christ's kingdom is here described, while God wished only to declare to his prophet what should happen to the first advent of Christ. So in other words, he's saying that this interpretation of Daniel 7 only goes up to the time of the coming of Christ. And then he goes on to describe how, he believes the 10 horns specifically are the emperors of the Roman Empire. Like everything from the beginning of the Roman Empire, even, prior to the emperors, all the way up to the end, the Roman Republic and so on. But the little horns are specifically what they call imperial Rome, which is that line of emperors from Julius Caesar through Nero and maybe a few other emperors that persecuted the church. So he points specifically to the persecution of the church under Nero. He doesn't say the little horn is Nero, he says it's imperial Rome. But he does mention Nero. Now what I do is I just simplify that and I say, well, the 10 horns are the line of the 10 emperors. They go from Julius Caesar through Vespasian, and the little horn specifically is Nero. So it's a little bit different than Calvin, but it's the same idea. I'm a little bit more specific. So one of the things you have to look at in Daniel 7 is he sees this vision, and he gives the vision, then he interprets the vision. I, Daniel, was troubled in spirit. The visions that passed through my mind disturbed me. I approached one of those standing there and asked him the meaning of all of this. So he told me and gave me the interpretation of things. The 4 great beasts are 4 kings that will arise from the earth. This is the same kings now as in chapter 2, by the way. But the holy people of the whole Most High will receive the kingdom and possess it forever. Yes, forever and ever. And that goes back to the reference in Daniel 2, which speaks of in the days of these kings, there will be a kingdom that will possess all the other kingdoms. So they're called kings, but kings and kingdoms can be synonymous in biblical prophecy. I wanted to know the meaning of the 4th beast, which was different from the others and most terrifying. Its iron teeth and bronze claws. The beast crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. I also wanted to know about the 10 horns on its head and the other horn that came up, before which 3 of them fell. The horn that looked more imposing on the others and had eyes and a mouth that spoke boastfully. As I watched, the horn was waging war against the holy people and defeating them, and the Ancient of Days came and pronounced judgment in favor of the holy people of the Most High. And the time came when they possessed the kingdom. So there again, he repeats that vision. And the 4th beast is the 4th kingdom that will appear on the earth. It will be different than all the other kingdoms that will devour the whole earth, trampling it down and crushing it. The 10 horns are the 10 kings who will come out from this kingdom, and after them another king will arise. And different from the earlier ones, he will subdue the 3 kings. He will speak against the Most High and oppress his holy people, and try to change and set times in the laws. The holy people will be delivered into his hand for time, times, and half a time. One of the reasons why I think this is specific to 10 kings is because it aligns very closely with the description of what happens in Revelation 17 with the 6th head of the beast. And the language here is very similar, okay? So when I did my commentary on Daniel, I just said, this is Nero, and I went through it, and I said, look, he subdues 3 kings. And I went to look at the 3 kings that came before him. Now, it just so happens in the Roman histories, it says that Tiberius was taken out of the way by being smothered by a pillow by Caligula. And so Caligula is next in line to him, and he happens to be the next emperor. There are some historians that doubt that actually happened, but Suetonius and Tacitus were 2 first-century historians. They both lived in the 1st century. And they're the only Roman histories that we have that tell about this. And they both say that, this is a rumor, but they say this is how the Emperor Tiberius died. He was being smothered by Caligula. He was taken out of the way. So then Caligula was assassinated by his own Praetorian Guard, these German guards he had around him. And then his replacement, Claudius, wasn't supposed to be king, but he was the next in line to be king. And then he was poisoned by his life at the time. And what happened from there was that there was another king, Nero. Nero wasn't in line to be king, but through a series of manipulations his mother made, it just so happened that he could become king. So that's how I interpret that. It's a very specific interpretation, but when you get into Daniel 11, you also see the same thing. Very specific details about the Seleucid kings. Very specific details about the Ptolemy. So I think that's in character here. Daniel gives you some really specific information about Nero.